So we've talked in April, we've talked in May on budget. Coming up on July 6th will be a need for a resolution or not. Revenue neutral rate. As you know, we have to submit to the county if we're going to have a mill levy that's different from revenue neutral rate by July 20th. So most of what I've got now today is just a kind of an overview of how that levy process works. A little bit more information on what we had talked about. April we talked about the fund sustainability, and really I said fund sustainability, talking about the general fund in this case. We talked about the revenue neutral rate, at the time what the estimate was, which really almost nailed it right on the head on what it's going to be, and the long-term impact to revenue neutral rate or mill levy that's flat. And we talked about that. I also talked about the budget that I presented was based on revenue neutral rate. We didn't make any assumptions about mill levy being level. It was we dropped the mill levy. Well, we didn't drop anything. We just held our revenue steady. We didn't make a change to it at all, regardless of what the mill levy was. I covered some of that long-term impact. It's an opportunity revenue that would be gone, basically. If, and that makes a big if, the mill levy was dropped every year at a revenue neutral rate. So the county turned it in this time. It was what a 2.7 mil drop for a level revenue generation. So assuming that happens every year, we're looking at just under $500,000 that would then need to be cut out of the budget or accounted for. So that's 4 years out. So back that up a little bit to just 2023. If we leave the revenue neutral rate the way it is this year, obviously we've got the budget for 22 covered. And that includes department requests that are essential to what they need to do to operate and all those requests. And again, this is on the general fund, just the levy funds, nothing else. In 23, we'd be looking at a sustainable cut. And again, this is if we do not have a mill levy that's level at this point, we'll be looking at $95,000 in sustainable cuts for 23. And that's just in the general. That's if we don't either have a level mill levy or go back up to 44 where it was. So that's $95,000 in 23. As you go each year, there's around $50,000 to $60,000 in costs that need to be cut, and that's making up for the loss in that organic revenue increase, if you will. So every year you'd have to cut that in order to make up for it. We talked about that in April. Just wanted to make sure that that is refreshed. In May, we talked about sales tax growth anywhere from 1% to 3%. Typically, it's around 1.5%. Feel like in 2021 and 22 it'll bounce back just a little bit stronger. Compensation is no different than what we've done in the past. It's around 2% citywide. Citywide, that's around $46,000. Health insurance is around 8%. It could be as high as 10. If it's 10, it's around 50,000. So that kind of gives you a sense of where that cost increase could end up being. So that's kind of a review of what we've talked about over the last couple of months. Just to kind of give you a flavor of what the mill levy looks Douglas County is right behind it, 46.4. And from what I understand, they're looking at a 1 mil increase already. And then the rest are out there to the right. But the big three obviously starts with the school district, then Douglas County, and then we bring up the rear on the bigger levy. On the right, just shows you what the percentages of that total look like, not just the mills, but the percentage. We sit around 28% of the total dollar that's left. As far as dollars levied per capita, I think this data is from 2019. The red bar is where Baldwin City is at 298, and this is per capita for cities population 3,000 to 6,000 statewide, right? So there's a lot more bars on here than names, and that's just because of not enough room to put them all up there. But it kind of gives you a sense of where we are. Bottom being Lyons, Kansas at 212. I knocked Mission Hills off because they're just out in La La Land anyway, at way over $1,000 per capita on, well, that was on the next slide, but this one's not. Yeah, it is on this slide because Mission Hills is around the same population of what you guys have, so it's not really a comparison, it's an outlier. But this just kind of gives you an idea of where we sit on a per capita level. I guess my conclusion would be we require a lot less property tax than some other entities. When you look at it that from a metro standpoint, the place you guys, with the MSA, Kansas City, Missouri MSA, we're still down toward the bottom. My alma mater, Olathe, is at 317. They used to be a lot higher. Tonganoxie is at 327. Lawrence is at 347. Edgerton, the road is 709. Almost well over double what you guys are. Just to give you an idea what it is. Again, this is per capita. Dollars levied per capita for the metro cities. That's the mill levies. On the sales tax rate, I'm just kind of giving you an idea, excuse me, where this sits. The minimum is Edgerton in that blue bar. The red bar is still Baldwin City down toward the bottom. The maximum is Overland Park, sitting right at 9.6%. So this is just normal rate outside of any TIF or CID that gets stacked on top of it. This is just a normal city rate, and that's in there. So that's the sales tax rates. That's property tax and sales tax comparisons. And just as a reminder, two different types of funds: governmental funds and proprietary funds. Tonight we're talking about the governmental funds, especially the general fund. Of the property tax, there's 4 of them: the general fund, library, cemetery, and the bond and interest. All of those guys obviously are impacted by the revenue neutral rate versus mill levy, level mill levy. And all budgets are exactly the same way. Everything that needs to be funded is funded in 2022. The resource drop is relative, and you have already had several conversations with different individuals, but it's all relative. Anything that drops in the general fund, obviously a drop in the library would have to find the same cuts along the cemetery bond and interest. So just covering some of the basic calculation when it comes to the levy itself. And sometimes this is alien to people, but I wanted to kind of try to walk through this on a $250,000 house. It's assessed, and this assessment's obviously a state level. They're the one that gives you the percentages. So a fair market value of $250,000, 11.5% of that is assessed as taxable. From that taxable value at $28,007, we get a levy of, well, 2021's levy of $44,828. It's per thousand, so you divide the 44,828 by 1,000, you get the 0.044. So you make that multiplication happen, and it's a $1,200 tax bill, right? And that's just for the city on a $250,000 house. Take this one step further. Calculations are all the same, right? Let's say this is my house and I want to add a room to it. What's going to happen to that mill levy? The room addition, let's say it's $25,000, which the one I'm putting on is a heck of a lot bigger than that because my wife is in charge of it. Nothing. I'm living it. I'm just saying. She's not here, and I can blame her.
We're taping this.
Yeah.
This is live. Yeah, okay.
Can I get
You don't know her
email?
Yeah. She wouldn't doubt that at all. So the room addition was $25,000. Same calculation here. The taxable value is at $2,875. Same mill levy. You got $129 in tax. That would be considered a new improvement, right? And what what this does is you've got existing value, which is the top line, and then the new improvement, which is the bottom line. So any growth in assessed value, you're gonna have those two types. Well, those two types of growth. It's broken down into residential, commercial, and commercial goes into a lot of other things. But when you're looking at growth, there's two types of growth. It's in that existing value and any increase on that existing value, and then that the increase, which is the new value. So in this case, that bottom shows the house at a 10% increase, and only because that bottom happened, right? So I'm adding 10% increase in my value. I expect my taxes to go up accordingly because I'm the one that did it. This isn't just a value increase. This is something I added to my house. Well, I'm gonna say my wife added to my house, my village. But now we got 275,000. Now, once that's assessed, the next year that becomes existing value, right? So that goes up 2, 3, 4%, just like everything else does. And up here, that's the January 1st, say of 22. Back here, we're talking about 21, right? Before we started building this add-on to it. So at 22, we're looking at a 10% increase. So I know when we got the assessed value from the county, it was around 6% increase. And that 6% increase isn't necessarily a 6% increase on everybody. And obviously everybody, if my house will be treated different than Scott's house, only because of the value and what the increase would look like. His may go up by 2% and mine by 6%. So that increase then changes what impact it's going to have to me. This actually goes backwards and shows you what that new and that existing value had done. And if I had done this graph better, the line on the top is a lot steeper than the line on the bottom. The light green is the existing value and how that's gone up. And that green bar, that green section is actually the new value. So 2017, there wasn't a whole lot. 2019, it got bigger. 2020 and 2021 is even bigger. And the reason that's happened, again, existing value, and we've got existing value right here, new value, and then the new NRP. We call it new NRP because it's got to be new value rate in order to be rebated back to folks. So you've got the existing value, add that new value in. Our total AV, total assessed value in 2017 is at 31.1. Right? Pretty simple. We're going to go, it's 2018 then, and assess 2018. So from 31.1 to the existing value in 2018, that 32.1 right here, right across the top is a 3.4% increase. And that doesn't include the new value or the NRP, which is both new, right? Add that up and you've got 32.6. The reason I point this one out is because it's a rebate that goes back to those that file for, obviously. And that number's getting a lot bigger, by the way. So more people taking advantage of it. So again, it's the same calculation if you go to 2019. From 32.6 over to 33.2, we got almost a 2% increase. And look at that new NRP at 690,000. Now it's going up exponentially as more people applying for that benefit. So we're at a 34.4. And then just opening it back up. So if you go to the 21 tax year, which we're in, this is for the 22 budget, the overall increase from 36.3 in the 37.1 in 21 is a 6% increase. But if you look at the existing, it's at 2.25%. I think this is critical because most people understand my value went up 7%. Well, if you look at your tax bill, it really didn't go up 7%. Look at your tax bill, what that percentage increase went up. I used to when I lived in Prairie Village, it went up 10, 12, 13%. Neighbors went up 2, 3, 4%. Mine went up because all the additions I was starting to add onto my house. Well, that's fair, right? But they're new value into that. So you kind of got to understand the difference between 6% and then that existing value of 2%. You want your new value to go up because that's where you're banking on getting revenue for core services for the city. So I wanted to make sure I covered this. I almost didn't because this kind of blinds me when I go through it, but I try to make it as simple as possible. Any questions to this point on kind of what I've gone over? Kind of went over it pretty quick, but the overall gist of it is when you look at levied taxes per capita for Baldwin City, you're toward the bottom. When you look at the overall sales tax rate, you're toward the bottom. When I say bottom, the lower part of obviously what everybody else is doing. Whether you look at it on a metro basis or you look at it on a 3,000 to 6,000 population. Your growth is doing wonders. Look at that new NRP is $1.5 million. That's assessed value. And I think this tap turns off next year. So you can no longer apply for it in 22. Now the rebate keeps going for what, 10 years? That keeps going, so that's on out there. But once that drops off, that's value that gets added to your existing value. That's also something that's going to be taken into account when you look at the revenue neutral rate. Let's say in 10 years, if the legislature keeps this around, it's going to play a part in that. So if that value gets added on, it's going to drop the millage even more for a revenue neutral rate, if that makes sense. So that's the revenue side of it. On the expense side of it, just for a reminder, the governmental funds, within the general fund, they fund these services, these departments. I don't think I'm missing any. Administration, parks, court planning, economic development, police, fire, pool, IT, and public works are the ones funded within the general fund. Obviously, library, and cemetery. So it kind of goes without saying, but I know we've got bond interest as well. So this correlates directly then to that revenue that I was just going through. When we look at the movement in those departments, what we're trying to do here is take from 2017 to 2022 and to show what those increases have been or those decreases have been and how that's moved. These are all expenses. So you can kind of see that line where it's bumped around. Court's been fairly level. The police department's been, well, from 2020 actual, well, this is 2019 actual, it's kind of steadily going up, and that includes the capital, which you would expect to see that. In some cities, that things are skyrocketing. The pool's a little lower. You see public works is almost flat. And fire's the same way. So your bigger increases are happening within fire and police, which you expect to happen in public works. Those are core services that everybody on the outside sees. You want that to happen. The bulk of your budget, $1.3 million in the general fund, is police. Public works at just under half a million. With fire at 138. So you can kind of see where the biggest part of that budget is within the general fund. And that's according to the 22 budget. Within that 22 budget, these are the ads.
Back in the last one, Ben, that public works, that's not the transfers, or does that include the transfer?
No, it doesn't include
Okay, so
transfers.
this is,
It's core services.
okay.
Yeah.
That's right out of general fund.
Yeah. Those are all core services. As far as the ads are concerned, all deductions, it depends on how Glenn looks at it. There's a position eliminations under administration. That's actually allowed us to afford a lot of what you see up here. It's taken advantage of that. And those positions that are removed are sustainable position removals, unless you add that position back, obviously. But it's moving that funding budget to something else. With all the stuff we've got up here, I believe what I'm looking at is all discretionary. It's all one time. It's all capital. And that's not a bad place to be, because capital doesn't take place every single year. Maybe with the exception of the police car, we try to keep those guys in the right kind of vehicles. And Public Works is a little bit more this year, just because of most of the pool. This is all pool improvements that are over here under the Public Works department. That is what I've got for an overview. I've got a timeline on the next slide, which is the last slide. But I wanted to make sure that you guys had enough information if you had any other questions as far as revenue neutral, mill levy, flat mill levy, we just know where we're gonna be January, July 6th when we come back. Or not. It just all depends on where we're gonna be.
And we haven't received any request yet from the library. I think they're having their
No, I
meeting
haven't seen
tonight,
it.
so that also may change
Yeah.
what July
Right.
6th brings. I
Right.
mean, if they
That's right.
request their assessed valuation and the council decides to stay flat, then we still have to send out.
That's right.
So the ultimate decision on the budget comes in August.
Yeah, well, yeah, it does. And that's what I'm trying to do here is you get two boxes, two sections here. On the top is the revenue neutral rate, and this includes the library. They're right like we are. They've got to do the same thing. Deadline to publish the public hearing, the deadline to submit to the county, whether it's an increase or not, is going to be July 20th. If you don't increase, if it's revenue neutral, even with the library, then it's the same schedule we've always had. We'll publish, the last date for publishing is July 20th. We'll do a public hearing on August 3rd. 17th is the backup date, but August 3rd would be the public hearing and potentially adoption of the budget. If either any of the mill levies are flat mill levies and not revenue neutral, then that different calendar takes over. We need to, the idea would be a resolution, obviously, on Tuesday, one way or the other, to do the revenue neutral. And then we would, the deadline to publish for the public hearing would still be July 20th. That part of the statute was left alone, so you really kind of need to know where you're at by that date. You need to know where you're at, by that date anyway, because you got to submit it to the county. But then the public hearings can't happen until after August 20th, so September 7th is your first meeting in September, obviously. And then that gets submitted for certification on October 1st. So there's a little bit of a difference. But the one date that we need to be aware of is really Tuesday. And have an idea where we want to be. And it's either submit it to the county, if it's just revenue neutral, then it's revenue neutral across the board. I haven't seen anything from the library. I don't know if Glenn has either.
Not yet.
So I know the budget that's been submitted is revenue neutral. Can you go over, because for the non-finance committee council, kind of what that means?
Yeah.
How that affected our departments?
Sure.
That type of stuff.
Yeah, so the revenue neutral, the way budget has taken place in the past, all entities, and you guys are just the same, is a level mill levy, and it's always been what I know I've heard or I've been able to tell the public whenever I was a budget manager. Revenue neutral for us meant mill levy was the same. We didn't increase the mill levy, so your real mills aren't going up. In this case, the state says, well, that's not really so. We're going to say the revenues, what you generated in 21, will be the same in 22. And if you want that revenue to change, go up, then you've got to have a different publication process. And that's really, fundamentally, that's the only change. Your policy could still be level mill levy. That's just always been your policy. What you're deciding on is if that revenue needs to be the same as it was in 21 for 22, or if it needs to be that revenue goes up with the mill levy being the same. So the county gives us a mill levy. Right now, the 21 mill levy is 44.8 mills. In order to leave that revenue alone, the county says your mill levy's got to go down to 42.1. And that will leave your revenue the same, right? So you only have that revenue from 21, it'll be the same in 22. In the past, revenue from 21 has gone up because your assessed value's gone up. The levy stayed the same, your assessed value's gone up. So in that case, it'd be the organic growth. Think about it, your rate at which you're taxing a dollar has not changed. It's still 44.8, right? When you go down to 42, that means the rate at which you're taxing a dollar just went down. So it's never the rate at which you tax it, just like with the capital. The rate at which you're taxing is not going up at all. Unless you're going to 45, 46 mils, then it goes up. I don't know if that makes sense, but fundamentally, the revenue stays the same from 21 to 22 under a revenue neutral, thus the name model. The way the budget is set up is we've made the assumption that the tax revenue we've had in 21 is going to be the same as 22.
Maybe I missed it in a slide somewhere. Did you have it broken down to where in 2022 the assessed value increase, what percentage of that came from the NRP?
I didn't know the percentage of that.
Not a-
Come back here. 21, which is the 22 budget, is that 1.5 million.
That's just
That's
in
just
people
NRP.
adding on to their homes or building new homes.
Yeah. That's the assessed value subject to NRP. So if you live in your house and you're renovating it, your house is still the old existing
Right,
value.
that stays.
This is add-on.
Add on, right.
Yeah, this is all
Okay.
added. And then it's not 100%, I think it's around 97%. You don't rebate all of it.
You can't rebate the
Right.
state.
Yeah,
Right, right.
So it's not all of it.
So am I thinking about it correctly? So to go revenue neutral for 2022 would mean to not accept the return on our 5-year investment in the NRP?
That's gonna actually be rebated back to the people that applied for that, no matter what. No matter what you do, that'll still be rebated back, because that's
Okay.
part of that program. So if you have revenue neutral, your revenue neutral will be based off that 37.1, not the 1.5. That makes sense?
Yes.
Yeah. Now, when that falls off out of that NRP, that 1.5 then goes up to the 37.
At that point.
At that point,
it
that's
would
gonna
be-
make a difference.
Right.
Yeah.
You would not want to go revenue neutral
Right.
and avoid accepting the
Right.
5-year investment you made. Okay.
Exactly, yeah.
Next year's the first year of the NRP drop-offs.
Right.
So which is very small. 'Cause that's the first
Yeah,
year.
it's really small.
So I promised the citizen I'd bring this up. Mr. Jerry Smith came to visit me today and asked that we increase the council pay to $100 a month per council member. My question to you, man, does that need to be inputted in this budget now, or is that a low enough amount that if a council or a future council decided to do it after a budget was passed, then it wouldn't affect the budget?
You've got enough room in your budget to where you wouldn't have to amend amendment, only because your reserves are so high that you leave, you cash carry over, in other words. Because it's usually plugged into your budget. You're talking about $700 a month.
No, it'd be 500 for 5 council members.
Okay.
Well, it'd be $200 net increase.
Be under,
per
I
month,
mean, it'd be under
2,400.
10 grand, yeah, be under 10 grand, so. The best way to do it, best practice, would be put in this budget. That best practice, but it doesn't stop you from having a council do it the next year.
I promised I'd bring it up.
I'm not trying to get rich. But it's gonna make you get enough money.
$100 is gonna get you rich, you're doing something I'm not.
Buying a boat.
So, I guess before we tackle that, make sure we close this out, the intent here, there's been some great discussion in the Budget and Finance Committee for quite a while about revenue neutral and should we, shouldn't we? And I can't even say there's a consensus, which doesn't matter because it's a council that consensus that matters. But just want to make sure everybody understands, I guess in kind of round numbers what we're talking about, and correct me as soon as I say something incorrect, but from a budget perspective, we saw the per capita per mill levy per tax, right? So that represents about 10% of our budget. Okay, so let's keep that in mind, that the affordability of the city, 10% of it is generated from our property tax. All the other revenue streams also impact that, and I think we need to go look at that as well as we dive into how do we compare with other cities. But that's a good start about comparatively how we're taxing. And then from this revenue neutral situation, based on the 6% increase on assessed value, that roughly about $100,000. That if we went with our normal, keep the mill levy flat, take the assessed value into the budget, it's about $100,000 that we would be not taxing the citizens on for 2022. So that's, and then the question becomes to Ben's point is, well, if you don't ever go back and recapture that, if you stay flat from there, it compounds itself, right? But every year, the council will get to make the decision on, we could go up to 50 mills if we wanted. There is no cap on the mills. It's what the council decides they want to do financially. So it really is, I think the decision we need to make on Tuesday's council meeting is, do we want to go revenue neutral because we have to put the process in place one way or the other, or not? So I just wanted to have the council have the discussion, ask if there's anything they wanted the Budget and Finance Committee to look at between now and then be prepared to make that decision on Tuesday.
That's fair.
Do we also need to anticipate a library decision on Tuesday? Are they on the same schedule?
Yeah, they are.
Yeah, so if the library requests their
Yeah.
portion of the assessed valuation, then that automatically will throw us into a notification.
The only way it wouldn't is if we went even more, revenue negative to cover that up. That's not part of what we've ever committed to do, right? So if they keep their mill levies flat, we take revenue neutral, that's gonna be a revenue increase for the city because we supply them. And actually, when you look at the dollar breakout, it showed the city at 44.8, actually four of that is the library. Right, so it gets carved out, and they're kind of in their own decision process right now as well, so.
I think their meeting literally is tonight,
Yeah.
so.
That's all right.
Yeah.
We'll
Yeah.
have a recommendation.
Yeah, so you've got the rec commission split up, but not the library. So actually, the library being 4 mills to be cut out, and the city's about 40.82.
Are they going to present at the council meeting?
We asked for their recommendation in writing at least. I
Yeah.
don't know if we haven't gotten a request to present that I'm aware of, so.
Your next meeting is July 20th, the day we need to turn it in.
Right.
I don't think the county works late either.
That's a good point. I mean, I think because they need the council support to go non-revenue neutral or not, they probably ought to be prepared to talk about the rationale if that's what they want to do.
You mean at this next meeting?
Yeah,
We can ask them to come present.
yeah.
Yeah, they'll have it by July 6th.
Oh, yeah.
They're-
Yeah, I
they're
think it's
aware of
gonna be ready this week.
Right.
From now.
Right,
Just didn't know
but
if it was-
prepare the rationale about why they
Yeah,
want.
they're prepared for that.
Yeah. So I think that would just help the council make the decision about yea or nay, because it's actually two issues.
Right.
City revenue neutral and whether we accept.
So I'm preparing myself
A
to
library.
make two decisions.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. It really is.
Regardless of if they stay equal.
Yeah.
Not to prolong or push any kick a can down the road, but the league has mentioned, which makes sense, the league has mentioned, even if you stay at the revenue neutral rate, they're recommending notifying the county that you're gonna have a public hearing for revenue neutral rate after August 20th. Because if that assessed value comes back as something different and your mill levy actually goes up beyond the revenue neutral, you gotta pay a refund back to all your citizens. So it could go from 42,102 to 42,108, and you're already out of compliance.
Well, and I
Which the
think that-
legislature never thought about that.
I think that, and Scott, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that Finance Committee has always been working under the premise that we're gonna have to send out notifications anyhow, because
Yeah.
we're anticipating the library to request it one way or the other.
Yeah,
That's the anticipation.
so that would cover it, that right there would cover it, yeah.
Yeah, so really, that makes
Yeah,
that makes July 6th decision easier at that point,
Yeah.
and then we gotta move the work into August, and the Finance Committee's already been working on some educational information to put out to citizens
Mhm.
based off of all this to start kind of that process. It'll make your head hurt.
there's a part of the Eastern Kansas GFOA, Government Finance Officers Association, and the agenda has a survey of questions. The top question is, are you moving off of RNR? If you are, what's the levy? Is it gonna go up above mill levy, your normal level? And it's made up of everybody on the east side of Kansas with us, mighty of those on the west side. So, and that's July 13th, so that'll be interesting to see. That's obviously after July 6th. That'll be interesting to see who's doing what. They also go over ARP money and what they're going to be doing with ARP money. That's what I got for you.
So my question, because it has came up, if the council chooses to go revenue neutral for next year, does any of our departments get cut or lose funding for anything?
No, it's as is. Nope, you're absorbing it as is. I mean, it's all good. That's the way the budget was created, and it's got a surplus in it. Not much on, but it's a surplus. Yeah. And as I've always maintained that your short term, you look good in the short term. It's going to be the long term. What that impact of today's decision is on tomorrow. That's really, and that's always the way.
Which there's always a lot of variables in that.
Right.
There really are. There really
And
are.
I think today's decision impacts next year, and the next year's decision will impact the following
That's right.
year. So
Yeah. You can only make so many assumptions. Yeah.
I don't know that this decision impacts anything other than 2022.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, because for me now.
We could
it's-
go
No,
recapture that.
You're right.
in the
It's
following
the
year.
assumption you use. That's exactly correct.
Yeah. So I just don't want to message that this is a compounding decision when it really
No,
isn't.
right. Yeah. No, you're right.
And it's a conversation changing thing, because now you're not just talking mill levy, you're talking
Yes.
true dollars. Hey, this year,
Yeah, that's right.
this
That's
much to
exactly right.
operate the city.
Yeah.
Next year, maybe this much, depending on various circumstances in the economy. It could be, that's gonna affect the mill levy.
Right.
It's just about the dollars that we need.
And
to
there may be
operate.
we get into next year's budget for '23, there may be another opportunity to move revenue around, actual revenue, user fees around. Not talking about utilities, I mean, charging for services people use. With other areas, it's usually community center or their parks programs, whatever it is. If they got a park program that users are actually paying for the program and they're sustaining that. Maybe something similar to that we can do instead of counting so much on revenue.
And this budget doesn't take any assumptions into the federal money that we
No,
will
it
be
does not.
receiving.
That's all outside of this. Yeah, that's all outside of this.
So
That's
just,
a good point.
just an example of how, I think the simplest form of how this would potentially go is revenue neutral this year. Our 2022 budget with salaries, everything's baked in and is covered by that. So next year, we have the salary study and we come back and say, hey, we need to increase salaries to be competitive. Let's just pick a number, 3%. Okay. We're gonna have the same decision next year. Do we want to stay revenue neutral? Well, you're gonna have to find that 3% somewhere else. If you can't, then you have to go to a hearing and say, look, we want 1, 2, 3% more. We're gonna raise your mill levy from where it was, or take it back. Let's assume the assessed valuation went up more than 3%. We could actually keep the mill levy flat again, take the increased revenue and fund the raises, right? So depending on what the valuation happens next year versus the increased costs that we have will depend on whether we accept revenue neutral, and that will also dictate whether the mill levy goes down when it does when you're revenue neutral versus up if you're not, or the same if you want to just take the assessed valuation. So it's really, it'll force us to go to the public and say, we need more revenue than we had last year, and here's why. And specifically call it out, have a hearing, get input, and full transparency about what we're doing. I think that's, I don't know if that was an intended consequence of the law, but that's kind of what's happening, and that's not a bad thing in that regard.
Once a taxing entity accepts that assessed value or part of it, is that then your new baseline going forward, or does it go back down to every year? Do you have to make that case, or you?
It's really what Scott says. You're really focused around revenue. So you're starting with the assumption that your revenue is the same from one year to the next. And if you've got, like he said, if you've got a compensation issue, just because I like to pick on fire and police because it's my favorite department, it's really hard. But you've got, and a lot of entities have got manpower issues around those two. So in this case, police, you need to increase those pay Well, then you go to the public for an increase in revenue. That may be a mill, that may be a half mill, that may be 2 mills. It all depends
There
on
may
that
be no
year.
mills if the assessed valuation goes up enough to cover
Right,
it.
exactly.
But I think to answer your question, Brian, that yes, that becomes, if you, once you accept that assessed valuation, the following year, if the assessed valuation goes up again, that whole assessed valuation is
Stays-
set as
That's-
your new baseline.
That's what that was
That's
correct.
Because if we accepted this and it raises our revenues by $100,000, next year when we go to accept the assessed valuation, it goes up by another 5%, and that's another 100,000.
Yeah.
With that new 100,000 we accepted this year, and you accept that, that's additional.
Let's make sure I understand. You said that we're accepting the assessed valuation. We're accepting the revenue neutral calculation based on the assessed valuation and a mill levy to get us to revenue neutral.
That's what I'm understanding. him saying.
Yeah, the assessed value, with the percentage of increase in the assessed valuations. That dictates your mill levy.
Right.
So he's saying if the revenue.
We're
neutral
not
rate-
accepting that. It is what it is.
Yeah, it's the revenue neutral rate you're accepting.
Correct, but if you're taking the excess of the increase in assessed valuation
Correct.
this year, that's the decision.
Yep.
So what Brian was asking is,
Yes.
if we accepted that assessed valuation for next year, is that our new baseline
Yes.
of what the discussion is right now? And the answer is yes.
Yes.
Because it's about if you take more revenue than what you did prior. So does that make?
Yeah.
did that-
Yeah. I'm looking at it from a different side of the equation, but I get, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. And this goes to what you were saying, I think is, right, starting up here, this is the existing value for January 1st,
Yep.
2017, right? Add the new value, here's your new baseline, that new baseline slides over to 2018, you add, and then that slides over.
Right.
That's what you, so you're right.
So was it so if we go revenue neutral and we don't accept assessed valuation, that's 95,000 approximately in just dollars?
Dollars, yeah.
So let's say we don't go revenue neutral, let's say we just stay the way we've always been,
Middle levy the same.
everything's the same.
Then
And
you
then,
get that increase.
95,000.
where's that sit?
You get that increase.
Where's it sit?
General fund.
Just stays in the general fund, doesn't have to go
There's-
anywhere,
yeah,
doesn't have to
general-
transfer it anywhere, just it stays right there, okay.
It's general fund, library, cemetery.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if you don't go revenue neutral, if you do it like we've always done it,
Yep.
then that makes that conversation next year when you decide to go 3%, whatever your raises are, that's an easier conversation.
It is.
We need to say that, yeah,
There's a lot of.
we need to say that.
That's assuming a lot, that's assuming that that study shows a
Yeah.
dramatic increase in
Yeah.
that salary, in those salaries. I mean, that's a lot of assumptions stacked on.
Yeah.
I mean, we're assuming, I think your assumption's right, that the salary study will show that we need an increase.
I think it is, yeah.
But we don't know what percentage.
It's gonna be.
It's gonna be something.
It's gonna be something.
But my point is that to not go revenue neutral isn't just to waste money. That will go somewhere.
Yeah.
It's not for 2022, maybe for 2023. Somewhere where it's needed.
Anything else on that one? Everybody prepared Tuesday? Need anything else from the B&F committee?
Ben, can you clear something up for me though? Not to make everybody's life too complicated, get too deep in the weeds on this. The way we've done this in the past is we kept our levy for a number of years. It's been around 40, and seems that number. Assessed valuation grows, we see an increase every year. There's two reasons why it goes up. One is they existing, everybody's seeing about 2%, whatever. Then you see the new growth, which is about 2/3 of what we're doing. So those are that's new tax money coming in because people have whatever they've done out there, they've invested or built a new home, did an addition, whatever. So that's new tax money coming into the system. So you're seeing that growth even though you're holding your mill levy the same. If we do what we're suggesting now and drop it 2, 3, 4 mills over a period of 2 or 3 years, okay, we can get back. We can say, okay, we can increase our mill levy 3, 4, 5 mills as we go forward. The problem I see with that is that the assessed valuation going up affects the new people. That's the new money. When you increase your mill, that captures every taxpayer,
Not just a new.
not just the new. So what you're doing, rather than steady growth based on your assessed valuation, you're moving the mill up and down as you need it. That goes to everybody. The whole point of keeping your mill levy steady is to capture that assessed valuation every year so it keeps growing steadily, and that matches up with your needs. If you continue to go up and down like that, you're going to see your property tax will be lower in 1 year and then up again, up and down, up and down. Is that really what you want to do? Because I think our expenses do not do that. They slowly go up. That's why property tax, the way we've done it, has worked out for us. So if we are anticipating our expenses to rise and fall, it's a way to do it. But I don't normally see us do that. So you see what I'm getting at? If you move the mill levy up or down, so let's say we go down 3 mills, you go back up 3, that affects everybody, not just your new people. See that there's 2 different sets of people being taxed there. So everybody see that? It's a little more complicated than I want it to be. It's like an algebra problem after a while. I get it. But
It's
see,
not
you're
your people being taxed or not taxed. It's
sure they are, because the mill levy falls on everybody.
Yeah.
so correct.
So if I raise it to the mill 3 mills this year, that captures everybody, commercial, industrial, whatever. But if I'm just capturing that assessed valuation, that's the new people coming on.
So, for instance, what he's talking about, on a $250,000 house, if you had your mill levy be flat for the next 4 years, you're actually generating $106 more than what you had the first year, by year 4. That's what you're generating.
That's
Just by
what you're
having
saying.
flat mill levy, just by virtue of the assessed value going up and the mill levy is flat. Now, if you go revenue neutral for the next 4 years, and again, I'm just making an assumption, it chicks down every time, and you actually increase it back by 44 mils, you're actually generating $271. That's because it's being applied to all assessed value, not just the new stuff. I didn't believe him until I did the calculation. Then I'm like, okay,
That's the danger. So if you then try to go back and recapture those mills, everybody thinks they're declining every year, and you will slightly. When you go back and say, I want to go up 4 or 5 mills, you're going to far outstrip that $100 in that 1 year. You're going to almost triple people's, and nobody's going to actually do that.
Well, so I'll counter that with, I think the budget should be based on a needs, bottom-up budget built that way, and then you figure out, start with revenue neutral every year, figure out what that would allow you to do and not do, and then you figure out what you want to go do. I'm not saying that we have to get back on track to capture the assessed value gains every year, because by the way, sometimes it goes backwards, right? It goes down. So
It can.
It has. So
Yeah.
I think we build a budget, and in those years, we're going to have to probably raise the mill levy to, again, if you have a budget built on needs, then you need to get to X. You've got to figure out what the mill levy needs to be to get you there. And I understand.
I hear what you're saying,
I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, but if you do raise it, see that the impact is much stronger than I think you realize. So once you go back like that, I mean, and then you try to rebuild it back in for whatever reason, that this doesn't fall on just the new construction that you would have been capturing, because you've lost that already over that period, whether it's the next year or the next year, whatever. Then you're going to go back, and the only way to capture that is by mill levy increase. So
On a bigger base, right?
not bigger, smaller, and
Right.
that's the only way you're going to get back.
Right.
So, but that falls on everybody, not that if you just kept that new construction that's coming in, you probably wouldn't have to do that. So it's going to work against your existing property tax number, is what I'm saying. Eventually, there's going to be a point where you have to increase that mill levy, and then that's going to fall on everybody when it should have been the new construction coming in, if you just captured that. So there's 2 different ways to do it. You can do what you're talking about, just kind of go, all right, like zero-based budgeting, and just build it from there and change it every year.
That would be something to look at on Friday to understand the real impact of that. Because in my head, I can't figure out
Yeah, I agree with Scott. I'd like
that scenario
I'd like to see
of.
the real-
We can show you that. I mean, like I said, I'm not trying to make your heads explode.
No, I mean, if it's real, we need to understand it.
But that's the danger of doing what we're talking about here.
Well, then I
At
think
least
we
in
all
my
need to
mind.
understand that.
Yeah. And maybe everybody's comfortable with that, so it's all right. But
Well,
I don't know if they will.
I just don't want to make sure, I want to make sure everybody's not comfortable with just not raising the mill levy because no one likes to raise the mill levy. I mean, that to me is in the past. You're going to raise it because you need to fit a budget that everybody's talked about and agreed upon. and the citizens have an opportunity to come in and say, I don't think you need to be spending that for this, so. But yeah, I think we need to understand what you're saying and make sure we're not doing something that has unintended consequences.
Yeah, and I think it would be a big one. Big,
Well,
I mean,
that's what I
eventually,
want to
yeah,
figure out.
we can show you that.
Okay.
We can run some scenarios by
What
that.
I'm
Show you.
just saying is perfect.
Yeah, that's not a problem.
And email it now to you.
We can also show you how our utilities and whatever compare with other cities.
Yeah, I mean, I think
We've already done
that's,
those. We've
yeah,
already done
I know
those
you
studies.
have.
They're fairly recent, so you can see what those look like, how we compare as far as our fees and our charges go with other cities, and we compare pretty well.
I agree with Scott. I would like to see that on Friday morning.
So would all of us see that?
You
We
can
can
send
send
it
We will
out.
send it out
Yeah, we'll send it out to you.
Great.
What,
Okay.
Just a couple of,
ahead of the,
like I said, we'll try to simplify it as much as
and we can
can.
talk about it then too. if we-
Yeah,
everybody
talk about
understands.
it.
And actually, what I've got set up is very, very similar to that flow chart that has the way the mill levy is calculated. I just did that for 4 years. So I'll clean it up, obviously, it's full of all kind of other junk. Clean it up and send it out. Yeah, so you guys first, but then you send it out to everybody else. Just as a heads up, I'm moving on Friday, and I'll be divorced by Saturday if I don't help her move on Friday.
Well, you're assuming your wife is not watching.
She has not seen this yet.
And, I mean, you were talking about how much you spend, so
Yeah.
are you a finance guy?
We had that discussion. Trust me with used a lot.
Yeah.
The kid was failing math class like a couple meetings ago.
So,
Because I do this all the time.
So Ben, I guess, could you get a document put together?
Oh,
by
yeah,
Friday
I'll
that
get
we
with
can
Glenn,
discuss
that's Friday
Friday
morning,
morning?
that's not a problem.
And then
Yeah.
we can discuss it with Glenn since you can't.
Yeah, I can walk.
Can we have this presentation too?
Yeah.
I think it's not.
Yeah.
Actually,
We put it up there already.
Yeah, I would.
Lynn's got it loaded.
Okay. So
Oh,
that'd be
okay.
great.
It's out on the internet, on the
Yeah,
website.
that
I think.
Shows what I do.
Great.
Yeah, make it loud.
I've changed my cell phone number and my phone.
Okay. Any other discussion on this? No. We'll have a lot more on Tuesday, I think.
It's a work in progress, is what it's.
so I'm glad you brought it up. Now's the time. We got to figure it
Yeah.
out.
Yep.
Yep,
All right.
good.
Thank you all.
Thank you guys.